Okay, and starting the microphone, making sure it's the one. Yeah, it looks like it's the one. All right, great. So, this is another one of those unedited notes. I've done a couple of these already, and the uptake of them have been really well, so thank you guys. This is another one, and I am kind of piggybacking off of the last one that I did of the Heiken epics, and I decided to look at Between the Buried and Me's epics. Now, the Between the Buried and Me don't have a lot of epics. In fact, they really only have two. And even the one, Whitewalls, it is kind of an epic. See, in my mind, an epic is something that goes beyond the 15-minute mark. And I just did a little bit of research, and I found that White Walls, being the first one off of Colors, is 14 minutes and 13 seconds. Now, I'm still going to include it as an epic because, in my mind, it really does everything that an epic should. Not only does it end and cap off a beautiful album, but it is kind of the grand peak moment of that album. It's what the entire album's kind of building towards anyway, and the big play out at the end is just phenomenal. Now, they also have the big epic from The Great Misdirect being Swim to the Moon. And then I also put on from the Parallax album, the last track, which I'm just going to look up because I always mispronounce it, so I want to make sure that I'm getting it right, which is The Silent Flight of the Parliament. And that one is beyond the 10-minute, or it's beyond the 10-minute mark. It's beyond the 15-minute mark, which is something that I need just to kind of justify it as being an epic. So I reached out to Twitter and I asked Twitter, what is your favorite epic from them? And honestly, the results did not surprise me at all. I'm just going to grab my phone so I can pull those up. Not surprised in the least. I wanted to be surprised, but I was not surprised at all. Oh, excuse me about that. So yeah, as you can tell, White Walls was definitely number one, amounting 40% of the overall votes. And it is very interesting because I only got about 10 votes on this. So if you want to follow me on Twitter so you can partake in this and get some really juicy stats, that would be amazing. Left that down below if you want to check it out. It's just notes, reviews. So yeah, I got 10 votes over 4 categories. I put White Wall, Swim to the Moon, Silent Parliament, or Silent Flight Parliament, and then others, just to let me know below. Maybe I missed something because, I mean, Between the Buried and Me, even though they have a lot of really long songs, those big epics, they really don't do a lot of, which is why I can only really pick out 3. So White Walls being number 1, obviously. As I had mentioned when I was talking about it, it's the big build-up for the entire Colors album. It has one of the biggest drops and the biggest, like, banging moments when they start repeating that whole White Walls. And that end guitar playout just makes me gush. It is so brilliant. And it doesn't have to be like ridiculously fast. It doesn't have to be like overly technical. It just has to be very emotive. And that is definitely what it does. The one that I was kind of hoping, but I knew it would not, like hoping against hope that it would, was Swim to the Moon. Swim to the Moon is actually my favorite one. And so I almost put this out just to see if, you know, I thought that White Walls was going to be number 1, but I was kind of hoping to see if Swim to the Moon might sneak up there. They got 30% of the vote, which, yeah, that makes sense. I could see that being number 2 because even though it is my favorite, because like it's more self-contained, whereas the other songs that I'm going to be talking about is the lead up and it bleeds into it and it's kind of the amalgamation of the entire album. Swim to the Moon is much more of a standalone epic in that it's not really reliant on anything else outside of itself. But I do love the presentation of it. It was actually one of the songs that took me the longest to kind of digest as well. So that being a really big factor in it, the more I listened to it, the more I actually got out of it. I love the playouts. I love how they reuse the theme like 3 or 4 times, and each time is just slightly different because they're doing different things with it. I love how each section kind of blends into the other and really kind of catapults each one further along as well. I thought that was such a great utilization of the space and the time as well. Well, I'm saying as well quite a bit here. This is one of the downsides of the unedited notes things is I can't edit any of those out, so I kind of have to be mindful about all those. Anyway, yeah, love Swim to the Moon. It doesn't really have the big finale play out that a lot of these other tracks have, though, which is part of the reason why I can see it not really being a fan favorite as much in comparison to White Walls. But yeah. So I love Swim to the Moon. I love where it's like look into the mirror, close the circle. I think is another one. But yeah, it's like look into the mirror. I think that's it. It's been a while since I listened to it, and I really probably should have re-listened to it before I did all this. But whatever. Let's talk about the Silent Flight Parliament, the 15-minute semi-closer track from the Parallax Part 2. The interesting thing about this one is, like, I agree that it is the weakest of the three that I had put up in there. This only got 20% of the votes. In that, like, it's the conglomeration, but the big finale kind of happens before and after this song's big finale. Like, this big song finale is the reutilization of the theme at the very beginning of this track. And this was something that all these big tracks from the Parallax had. Layer Goes to Rest, Extremophile, Elite, Telios, Bloom, The Melting City, and, Silent Flight Parliament. Oh, I keep saying Parliament. Parliament. Just wanted to make sure I have a bad time pronouncing things. Each song introduces you with a theme at the beginning of the track and then revisits it at the end of the track. And this is the only time where I feel that's a detriment, because they have such a great build-up at the end where it slowly builds itself back up, and it continuously builds. And then once we finally get to that final build, I'm like, great, that was a perfect way to cap off this song. And then they kind of lean back onto the crutch that was at the beginning of the track, and I'm like, but when the build-up was so great, why did we fall back upon this other part? So now that's not necessarily to discredit the track overall, because I still love the track, but I do see it being, there's a couple of pitfalls of why the other two tracks, Swim to the Moon and White Walls, kind of elevate it a little bit more, or at least elevate themselves. And much like White Walls, this one is very much dependent on the album that is surrounding it. It plays very much within the concept of the Parallax, and it's kind of a conglomeration of everything that kind of came before. So unlike Swim to the Moon, and very much like White Walls, you can't really listen to this track in isolation. You do need to listen to it in context of the overall album. And I mean, Goodbye to Everything Reprised is the big epic from the album, even though it's only about 2.5 minutes. So it is the final playout that really should have been at the end of Silent Parliament, but yeah, it's kind of there. So yeah, and also, I mean, if you did your math, 40, 30, and 20 only come out to about 90%. The other 10% was left in other. And I actually specifically left other alone because I wanted to see what other people were talking about. And, I'm going to try to pronounce this. Seletskis. I always want to call it Sketskis, but I know that's not it. Seletskis was a lot of people's other one. Even though I feel like Seletskis, The Endless Obsession, that was the one from Alaska, and that was one of the tracks that really got me into Between the Buried and Me, but it's not really an epic because it's only about, 8 minutes long. Now, I still love it, and I don't want to discredit it at all, but in my mind, it doesn't really surpass that epic part. It's not quite long enough, it's not quite epic in scope, and it's also very oddly placed on the album, too, because I believe it's, like, near the midpoint of the album, and for me, an epic needs to be either at the very beginning or the very end, and that's another reason why it doesn't quite work for me as an epic, but I am very pleased to see that it did make an appearance on quite a number of other individuals' questions about that. And then somebody also said Coma Eclectic. Again, that's an album and not necessarily a full, unless it's, no, that's the Coma Divide. I'm just going to double check. Coma Eclectic. Yeah, I think the track that I love from that was the Coma Machine. So yeah, a little bit different. And that, again, that's an overall album and not a track. So yeah, that's about it. That was my rambling on for about 9.5 minutes. Ooh, boy, this is going to be fun to watch. Yeah, and I like comparing these, like, really big epics as well. What's an epic, or what's a band from that you guys want to hear? Wow, let's try that again. What's a band that produces a lot of epics that you guys want to hear me do? I will probably do Dream Theater because I know they have a lot of them. And I know a lot of like 70s prog. They only really have like one or two, maybe outside of Yes, which like every other track from them from the 70s was an epic. But I'm thinking like you would only really be comparing like Pink Floyd's Atom Heart Mother and Echoes, and we already know where I stand on that one. And like Vandergraaf Generator, I think has Mowgli's 3 and The Lighthouse Keeper. And then everybody else, I think, just has one. Like King Crimson has Lizard and ELP has Tarkus. I think that's... I mean, Genesis has Supper's Ready. Nobody else really has any other, like, multiple ones. So anyway, let me know of some of those by commenting down below. And, yeah, so thank you guys so much for watching. I love doing these, so let's keep the good times rolling. So, yeah, I guess until next time, notes out.